Hey guys, you're watching Just Hoop Talk podcast on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and to our podcast on all streaming platforms. On this episode of Just Hoop Talk, we're going to talk about the Clippers and their failure this year in the playoffs. You're with Justin Henry, Will Thompson. Will, my man.
Yes, sir.
What are your early thoughts on these Clippers, man? They got eliminated a lot earlier than people thought.
Man. So I heard some of the quotes Paul George was talking about this year, one of the experiment. And you look at a lot of okay, some super teams that were put together. Maybe the first year it didn't click, but it takes some time. But at the same time, I mean, the expectations were through the roof for this team. Kawhi had just won a championship last year. They got to the second round of the playoffs last year without Paul George and Kawhi. So it's hard to hear those kind of excuses. They would have got to the finals and lost, okay, it's year one. They're still learning each other. But this was bad, man. This was really bad. The expectations were really high, and they fell really, really short, man. And it's a bad look in LA right now for sure, dude.
Yeah, you just look at the way that this team was built, and I think there was a lot of concern from everybody about the way, if they were, all there. You saw Lou Will out of the bubble for a while. Yeah. You saw Montrez leave the bubble. Pat Bev left the bubble. And there was no real leadership, and I think that was really glaring, especially in the 8 playing games. It was who's taking ownership of this team and who's, in control? Kawhi didn't seem to really be a voice. Doc Rivers really didn't even seem to be a voice. And it's when you just have a bunch of misfits playing together, what's the end game there, So for me, it was a little bit concerning seeing them, especially when everybody was saying, hey, they're going to be a team that's in the playoffs, in the championship contender, championship winner. I just didn't see it. To me, I thought that they were a good team, and I figured, just maybe I was missing something, that they would get there just based off of defense and the strength of Kawhi and Paul George. But they were missing too many components, man. And I think the most glaring aspect of this all is that it may not be Kawhi who should be the leader of that team, man, for the long term. I don't know that he can compete with a LeBron, KD. I don't know, man. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think we've been talking about, I don't know how many times we talked about this year. This team was so inconsistent from the very beginning of the year. They didn't show that they were consistently great at any point throughout the year. They would win a couple games, look really good, and then come out and look like garbage, dude.
Yep.
And I think a lot of that was just leadership. And you look at Kawhi on the court, he does everything right. He's that dude. He plays great defensively. Offensively, he's really good. But I think he's lacking that leadership, whatever that is. He's not getting in people's faces. He's not encouraging guys and slapping guys on the butt. He's not really doing anything. He's just out there doing his job to the best of his ability. And sometimes you need, if you look at the team last year with the Raptors, clearly Kyle Lowry was the leader of that team, right?
Yeah.
They didn't drop off much with him leaving, which is not saying a lot for Kawhi. I think Paul George is not truly a leader either. He's kind of a nonchalant guy. If it's going his way, he looks great. If it's not, whatever, you know what I mean? We saw it after Game 6. Before the game even ended, you saw the dudes walk off the court before the game was over. This team is missing a true leader. Doc Rivers, he seems like the kind of guy who could be a leader. He led a team a crazy team like the Celtics back in the day, but he just, for whatever reason, he doesn't have.
But are we holding on to that a little too much?
I know.
Are we holding on to Doc Rivers in that 2009 or 2008 championship, whatever it was, a little too much? I like Doc Rivers, and I think that, obviously he's proved his worth. I think he coached that Orlando Magic team with Tracy McGrady, who was with the Celtics. He's been with the Clippers now for a while and had some pretty good talent, pretty good players, but he hasn't got over that hump like people have expected him to since then. I know he got to the finals multiple times, but that was a great historic team with 3 Hall of Famers, potentially 4 if you include Rondo. I don't know. I think we might be overrating Doc Rivers, Paul George, and Kawhi. There's some real trouble there. And for those guys that are signed there for a long time, like Kawhi signed for a while, Paul George is signed for a while, and I don't think they plan on getting rid of Doc Rivers. I don't see how you fix that without bringing in somebody else immediately, man.
Yeah, I think one thing that stood out to me, especially in Game 7, was this team does not have consistent outside shooting. Like, they looked super easy to guard, bro. Like, the Nuggets were just packing the paint, daring Kawhi to shoot, daring Paul George to shoot, letting Lou Will shoot because we know he's inconsistent. And they looked awful offensively, all because they don't have a consistent outside shooter. And, like, how in today's game, how can you not have, like, a guy you can – I guess maybe Landry Shamet, a second-year player or a second, third-year player who's coming off their bench. But it just looks like – it looked like a bunch of pieces thrown together with, like, tough guy mentalities, but no true leader and no true direction for that team either.
I think that's why they're on paper. They are a very good team on paper because the defense, you think, okay, you got elite defender in Pat Bev, Kawhi, Paul George, Trez. Like, you got some elite defenders on that team. But when they get on the court, it's like something else happens, or you're not thinking about that personality factor, which is important for chemistry, for leadership. Like, those things are super important when you're trying to win a title, because all these teams, these teams are all really close. Like, it could go either way, obviously. But these teams, there's the leadership. And I think you notice that with Denver, like, they came together. They rallied. In 3-1, they were feeling confident still playing. And it's like when they had the 3-1 lead, it was like, all right, is this about to collapse? You saw Paul George hitting shots off the side of the backboard, man. And there was a key comment that came out just recently. Montrez called out Paul George saying, hey, it was your fault on this play. And Paul George was like, no, it wasn't. It was your fault. And he was like, well, you always say that you're always right. It's like Paul George does kind of come off like that. You think about it last year, when Dame Lillard hit the shot right in his grill, what was he saying? Oh, that's a bad shot. Like, at the end of the day, Paul George, you gotta take some ownership, bro. Man. And in order to take that next level, somebody on that team, Kawhi's probably not that person, but somebody's gonna have to take more of a leadership approach outside of, like, Pat Bev, Marcus Morris type players,
Can't be those guys. Yeah, I think one thing that really stood out to me, and it confused the shit out of me, because there's this great team with all these great defenders. And you remember that shot that Luka hit to win the game, and somehow Reggie Jackson ends up on Luka Doncic at the end of the game. You got Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, two of the best defenders in the league, and somehow, like, one of those dudes should have been like, yo, we're switching on this screen, we're talking, we're fighting through a screen, we're not going to let Luka end up matched up with Reggie Jackson. Like, someone should have stepped up and took charge of that moment, but no one ever did, dude. And that, it says so much about that team, right? Yeah. That, Paul George is the kind of guy to point to somebody else and be like, hey, it's not my fault, it's that dude's fault. And Kawhi is, I guess, too quiet or not assertive enough to just put himself in that position to where, I'm guarding Luka at the end of the game, man. That was a huge moment for me.
It was, dude. And it makes you wonder about Kawhi, man, because like Paul George, to be honest, I'm not trying to hate. Like, I don't know Paul George from anybody, but it seems like he's the kind of dude to be like, you know what? In this moment, man, I already got busted by Devin Booker. And obviously he had some things going on earlier in the series too. He mentioned, like, mentally just wasn't there, which is fine. Like, I get that out Paul George. You're the number 2. He owns that role. But for Kawhi, man, that concerns me, because it's like, when you see those other players, I think he wants the moment. Like, obviously, I think he's ready for it. He takes tough-ass shots. Like, he's a gamer, and in the playoffs, I think his level of play elevates. But what concerns me is that he's not like, in those clutch moments. Like, I feel like it's too much for him if he's not on a great team behind him. Yeah. If that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, he had the team with San Antonio, and he was able to kind of just play his role, be quiet, fit the system. Toronto, same thing. Like, there's no real pressure, no real expectations for the Raptors to be good. And to be honest, they probably don't win that series if Kevin Durant doesn't blow his Achilles. Like, obviously, like, that was a series that they probably wouldn't be talking about Kawhi as a 2-time champion. Yeah. And then now we're here with the Clippers, and it's like he has to lead the team. There are pressure situations. He's up against a lot of adversity for the first time in his career. And he really folded, man, in this series. It was disappointing to see. And I'm not sure if anybody knew it was coming, but to me, like, that doesn't signify top 5 player. Like, that is not a elite top 5. When we're talking about upper echelon top 5, you can't put him with Bron no more. You can't put him with even KD no more. You can't put him with Giannis no more, man. I think he's that next tier down. If you want to debate AD, you want to debate Luka, throw Kawhi in that mix, man, because I don't think he's up the upper echelon anymore, man.
Yeah, he was trending in that direction, and he's shooting straight down.
We even had a episode where we were like, is Kawhi the GOAT? And had like a real combo if he would have got a third title. And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't think that's anywhere in sight, bro.
And it looked like it, to see him in a game 7 when they needed it, just not even show up at all, and didn't really look like maybe he was a little frustrated, it wasn't going well for him, but didn't look like the kind of guy who was like, bro, if I gotta put up 50 shots, I'm gonna put up 50 shots.
Yeah.
That's how I'm going down. It didn't seem like that. It just seemed like, oh, it's not our night. This sucks. We'll move on. We'll get it next year. Do you think this is this fixable for the Clippers? Or are they got to tear something down? Is this fixable? Do they got to switch some pieces out? Where do you think they're at, honestly?
Honest take, man. Unfortunately, I don't think Paul George is that good. I think he's a good at times player. I think where his issue is that he's very inconsistent. And in a 7-game playoff series, I think you got to have somebody who's a little bit more consistent on the offense and defensive side of the ball. Can Paul George get there? Yes. I think he can become a more consistent player. But I don't know what that's going to take. I don't know Paul George. I don't know that team, that locker room, or his mentality going into games, because it seemed like the playoffs got to him early. When Devin Booker hit that shot, you could tell his entire just mentality switched, bro. He was out of it. They were ready to lose to the Mavs,
Yeah.
And it took him a minute to get it figured out. But Paul George, I don't know if he's that guy, man. I want him to be. I've always liked his game, kind of like a quiet 3D guy. I've always liked those type of players, but it just doesn't seem like he kind of reminds me of Danny Granger, he's a better version of Danny Granger. And it's can you win with him as your number 2? I think as your number 3, solid. But as your number 2 guy that you got to depend on, they wanted to compare him and say Kawhi was MJ and he was Scottie Pippen. I don't think that's even close. Not even close.
Yeah. I think they need one more piece. I think they need that Verge number 2, number 3 player, because I feel like that's when Kawhi is at his best, right?
Yeah.
Kawhi is at his best when he has somebody who, hey, maybe that dude is a number 1. We don't know if Kawhi is even the best player on this team. If you remember last year, dude, Pascal Siakam played better in a majority of the playoffs than Kawhi did almost the entire time. Kawhi had a better NBA Finals, but Kawhi needs that other player to kind of grab attention away from him, and Paul George was not that person this year. I think they need another guy to really come in and be a consistent scorer, and probably they need a stronger personality, man, that's going to shake some things up. And not a screamer type dude, not a a dog, they got a bunch of dogs. They need a real competitive scorer who's trying to kill out there. That's what they really need.
They need a big, man. When you said that, kind of came to mind, because even though he is a little bit of I wouldn't say a screamer, but a louder personality, Joel Embiid, I think, would be a really good fit. Somebody who can take command of the locker room, even if I don't know if he's a good leader, bad leader, but if he has the voice, the personality, he wants to win. And I think if something was going wrong, he has the personality to call somebody out if they're doing something wrong. Whereas I think Paul George is worried about how he's playing and what he's doing. Yeah. Kawhi is focused so much on the game that he doesn't worry about anything else.
No, bro.
Performance.
He's play defense.
I don't know, man. I just don't see how they fix this thing that quickly, because they really went all in with Kawhi and Paul George. And so they're committed to both of them long term. I don't see the kind of player that you could get to bring in as a third piece that's going to be the leader of that team unless you trade Paul George or Kawhi.
Right. They need someone like a Kyle Lowry, right? They need that dude, strong personality, can really run the offense, because you look at it who was running the offense for them? Was it Pat Bev? No, he's a great defensive point guard. Yeah, it was Kawhi. And you can't have Kawhi being your point guard, your scorer, your best defender. He's just not that dude. He's not LeBron, right? He's not built like that. So they got to get someone in there. I don't know. There's not a bunch of Kyle Lowrys out there, but they need someone like that, a strong personality who can step up and hit big shots and be that true leader of this team, because they don't have one. Chris Paul.
They need a big too. If you think about it, in the West right now, the Lakers aren't going anywhere for the next 2 to 3 years. The Nuggets are only coming on stronger in the next 2 to 3 years, and both of those teams have really powerful bigs.
Yep.
Who you got, Zubac guarding them? how there's no way that they're going to be able to keep up. Like Trez is going to be able to do some work, but he's not going to be able to keep up with 7 foot and 6'11" Anthony Davis and Jokic. Like there's just no way. And so to me, I feel like they have to get some type of big right now, especially getting bounced by Denver and almost getting bounced by the Mavs until Porzingis went out, bro. Like they could have been out first round. So I don't know. I don't see any hope with the Clippers, man. Unless you see something other than me, I think they're a big away, and it probably is going to come at the cost of Paul George.
Do you think the Clippers lost in that trade? Think about who they traded. Think about who they
gave up a lot in that deal, dude. They would have been better off if they had Kawhi with those pieces. Like, what was it, 4 or 5 first-round picks? They gave up Gilgeous Alexander, Danilo. I want to say somebody else, too. I can't even think about it right now. But it was so lopsided in OKC's favor. And at the time, it was like, let's do anything to get Paul George at all costs. But they really just mortgaged their future and bought in on a guy that obviously OKC was ready to get rid of after 1 year. I don't know. They got rid of him and Russ pretty quick. Like, seriously, they didn't even get a chance to really hold on to Paul George for a long time. And after they signed that deal, they were like, hey, you can go, bro. Like, we don't want any parts of you anymore. Which is kind of telling, man, that Indy was willing to get rid of him. OKC was willing to get rid of him. Like, I don't know. There's something about Paul George, man. I want to like him. I want to like his game a little bit more. It's just really inconsistent, man. It's tough to like him, you know?
He's one of those dudes that's almost there. He's always almost there. You know, you think, like, he's almost terrible, but he's almost really good at times. And it's just like, who is this dude exactly, man? He's really hard to read. We'll see, man. We will see moving forward with the Clippers. Next year is going to be a big year for this. This is going to be a big offseason for them. I think they can't sit still. They gotta make a trade. They got to get a true leader in there. Obviously, someone like they'll never get Chris Paul back, but someone along those lines would be like a great addition to that team. But I don't know if it's going to happen, man. I really don't.
Yeah, probably not. I think the one thing that they can hope for, and kind of as a parting thought, is that Paul George does kind of take that next leap up. I think Kawhi's pretty much maxed out. We know who he is.
Yes, who he is, yeah.
But if Paul George can get either some type of leadership voice, the respect from his teammates, or he can just elevate his game and become a little bit more consistent with his play, I think we can see it. But other than that, man, I think you and I agree it's going to be a tough road for these Clippers. So
that's only getting tougher, too.
Clippers salvageable? Do they have any chance at becoming an NBA champion here in the near future, or are they done? Let us know in the comments. That does it for another episode of Just Hoop Talk. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on all streaming platforms and on YouTube. We out.
Peace.
For more NBA, college, and hoops coverage, be sure to subscribe to Just Hoop Talk podcast on YouTube and all streaming platforms.